Hello everyone, my name is Dee. I am truly humbled to be here with you all today to present the John Chadwick Pet Policy alongside John Littermore, Head of Housing at Maidstone Borough Council. I started a platform of change for positive pet policies to be implemented in social and private accommodation in 2017. This was after the tragic death of my very best friend, my hon, John Chadwick, who died by suicide 10 days after being separated from his pets, Theo, Tinkerbell, and their feline best friend, Gizmo. John was born in Salford and due to unforeseen events had become street homeless in London for 2 years. He was found wandering the streets by St Mungo's homeless charity and later transferred to Kenwood Trust in Kent, a drug and alcohol rehab. He completed a 6 months rehabilitation programme and later secured a tenancy with a private landlord here in Maidstone. John was a gentle and kind man, one of the most grounded people I knew, loved and respected by everyone. The unconditional bond he had with his pets, I cannot fully describe, it just wouldn't do it justice. They absolutely adored him as much as he did them. They were his lifelines, his everything. John was served with Section 21 at the latter end of 2016 as the private landlord wanted to sell the property. He was evicted on the 6th of March 2017, separated from his pets and placed in a B&B by Maidstone Borough Council. He was later given one offer only of permanent housing with a no pet policy. If John had declined the offer, he would become intentionally homeless. John died by suicide on the 16th of March 2017, 10 days after being separated from his beloved pets. This was also the anniversary of his mother's passing. I channeled all the pain and grief into this platform of change to ensure this tragedy did not happen again. The support I had from around the world, the media, housing and animal experts and various charities alike was truly overwhelming. In July 2018, a new pet policy for emergency accommodation was implemented by Maidstone Borough Council, those now facing homelessness being able to take their pets with them if the properties were suitable to do so. However, in terms of permanent housing allowing pets, this would still be very much dependent on those providers that own pet policies in place. Almost a year and a half later, I had become a lot stronger and wiser. In 2019, I requested Maidstone Borough Council and the Communities Housing Environment Committee to review the initial pet policy for emergency accommodation. The clause within the policy had stated Maidstone Borough Council would not deem it an unreasonable offer if permanent accommodation was offered, which came with the no pet policy. I viewed this as assisting those already at their most vulnerable with their pets being helped halfway up the ladder into emergency accommodation and then facing sanctions should the permanent offer be one with a no pet policy. The Communities Housing and Environment Committee panel took my request on board. On the 25th of August 2020, a majority voted for a 1-year pilot scheme to be implemented. The pilot scheme would allow those residing in emergency accommodation with their pets to be able to decline the first offer of permanent accommodation on the grounds the accommodation being unsuitable for the pet or came with a no pet policy. On the 6th of April 2021, I attended a further CHI panel meeting to request the pilot scheme for permanent accommodation to be implemented as a pet policy. I made a second request as to naming both the pilot scheme and the pet policy for emergency accommodation after John Chadwick. A further CHI panel meeting was held on the 5th of October 2021. The panel voted unanimously for the pet pilot scheme to become a permanent policy and for this and the pet policy for emergency accommodation to be officially named the John Chadwick Pet Policy. Maidstone Borough Council, represented by John Littermore and the Communities Housing and Environment Committee, have indeed now set the benchmark. I am now striving to see the John Chadwick Pet Policy implemented on a national level across the UK. Local authorities could implement this policy, thus preventing serious consequences of separation from pets, including that of suicide. Sadly, what usually comes of tragedy is change for others. Our hearts will always be broken. The John Chadwick Pet Policy is truly a fitting tribute to his legacy of change for others. I can never thank John Littermore and the Communities Housing and Environment Committee enough from my heart for the progressive changes we have made together. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Hello, my name's John Littermore. I'm the Head of Housing and Community Services at Maidstone Borough Council in the southeast of England here in Kent. It's often the case that it takes something terrible to happen for some good to come out of it. And it was very much the case with the untimely death of John Chadwick that led us to review how we assist people who become homeless, particularly where they have pets. Historically, it's always been the case that local authorities are there to house people rather than animals. However, we do know that people do have great ties with their pets, and it can often be therapeutic and helpful for them, particularly for rough sleepers who spend many years on the streets with their pets as their only companion. So when John Chadwick's death occurred, it gave us pause to stop and think about what we do and how we do it. Was this an opportunity for us to do something better? At the same time, we came across Dee, who was John's friend, and Dee was obviously very grief-stricken by what had occurred, but rather than vent her anger or frustration at us, at the local authority that had accommodated John, she wanted to work with us to try and improve matters for people who found themselves in John's position. And so it was we began a journey with Dee that we didn't know where it would take us, but it's taken us quite far, and one that we're very proud of here at Maidstone Borough Council to promote. The way the policy works is to assist people who are normally homeless and waiting their permanent offer of accommodation. Previously, applicants only received one offer of accommodation when they made that permanent offer. And if the property happens to be a flat or a type of accommodation that isn't suitable for animals, then the person had a difficult choice about accepting that offer and losing their pets, or taking it up and being parted from their beloved ones. So what we looked at was how could we help people in that position raise awareness amongst our staff to assist people so that they weren't placed in that difficult position of having to make that decision, that dilemma that they will face between new home without pets or having to try and find something else in a very difficult housing market. So the way the policy was drafted was to enable people to refuse a property which would otherwise be suitable if the only issue was that they couldn't take their pets with them. So if people refuse on that basis, they're not penalised in the way they would have been under our previous policy, one that's adopted by many local housing authorities across England and Wales. And that had quite a good impact. Not only did it enable the people to make that decision themselves about whether they could move to the new accommodation and make other arrangements for their pets, or whether they would wait a bit longer and work with us to try and find something that was more suitable. So what that enabled to do was raise awareness for our own staff, so that when they were seeking accommodation for households with pets, that they took time and found somewhere that wouldn't place the people in a difficult position of having to make that choice. What that meant for the applicant was that they were not penalised if they then refused the accommodation because they couldn't take their pets with them. That gave them the comfort of knowing that they didn't have to make that difficult decision at that time, and that we could work together with the family, with the person who had the pets, to try and achieve a better outcome for all of us. Dee worked with our elected members and asked to come to our Community Housing and Environment Committee to present as part of the public questions that they can ask about how our approach could change to help people like John. Many of our housing association partners and local authorities have a no pets policy, particularly around flatted accommodation. Flatted accommodation is normally what single households are offered, so there is that conflict inherent in the system in which we operate. but we wanted to see how we could change what we did and how we did it. It coincided at the time with Maidstone Borough Council purchasing its own temporary accommodation. So that gave us greater control over our own destiny and how we could operate. So between the early years, Dee worked with our committee, with officers, and we created a policy for people going into temporary accommodation that would enable them to keep their pets with them. That operated for about a year and turned out to be a great success. We didn't have any difficulties, any major problems during that period. And I think that gave us all confidence that we could go to the next step. Now in John's case, he was in temporary accommodation, and the issue at hand there was that he was moving to permanent accommodation where he couldn't take his pets. And even though we had introduced a new policy that helped people keep their pets in temporary accommodation, it didn't actually resolve that big issue about what happens next when people move into permanent accommodation. So with Dee's encouragement and with the elected members' cross-party support, we reviewed it again with the view that we would look at how we could help people who had their pets, who wanted to keep them with them, without penalising them if they moved into permanent accommodation. And we introduced a pilot for a year to see what the impact would be if people refused a property where they couldn't take their pets. After the year, we came back to committee, and Dee was with us once again all along that journey. And we were able to report back to the committee that the pilot had been a success. There were no major issues. The concern that officers had that people might stay in temporary accommodation for longer hadn't actually occurred, or not in the numbers that we feared. So this gave us and our elected members the confidence to listen to Dee, to bring the policy into permanent place. And in memory of John, the committee decided that that policy should be called the John Chadwick Pet Policy. We're all very pleased to be able to do that and honour his memory in that way. It's interesting at the same time that the government has also issued guidance during that period to encourage landlords, social landlords, private landlords, to allow pets in the accommodation. And it's really interesting to see also that the new white paper on the private rented sector and housing includes passages in there, once again trying to strengthen the position to enable people to keep with their pets, retain those precious parts of the family that we all know how much joy and love they bring. So we hope that moving forward we can work with our partners, we can demonstrate to other local authorities and housing associations across the country that you can do this with confidence, that it doesn't have to be that scary, fearful policy that you dread doing because you think there's going to be lots of housing management problems, because we can demonstrate actually that isn't the case. And where you have responsible pet owners, you have happy tenants. So we're pleased to support Dee in the work she's doing. We're also pleased to be able to speak to this conference and encourage everybody to take that bold step like Maidstone Borough Council did and help people further. Thank you.